So I tried to deconstruct one of the most legendary wave artist track, Noah B, and his track is called Nylon. And this is what I got. And the best part, I did all of this in one synth called Massive X. I'm gonna show you guys how to do it. Let's go. If you're a big fan of Noah B like me, or even any wave music, then you've came to the right video, because today I'll show you how I made this melody stacks for Noah B's Nylon track. Now, I'm actually quite surprised at the fact that I got really close to it. I don't know what is the software that Noah B is using, but for me, I use everything in Massive X. And I made the synth with 5 stacks of sound. Now the purpose of this video is to show some respect to Noah B, because his song, the Nylon track, basically inspires me to do this tutorial. At the end of the day, I want you guys to have this takeaway of learning the principles of decoding a sound, or basically having the idea of sound design itself in Massive X or any other wavetable synthesis. I'm gonna run through this video based on the different components within Massive X that I use. This makes it easier so that you guys can understand what kind of oscillators I'm using, what kind of effects and what kind of filter settings that I use. Let's get into Massive X right now, and I'll show you one by one the synths that were used by Noah B from his track called Nylon. I'm gonna just go through one by one for the synths. So I'm not gonna restart the sound from scratch because the patch is already done. But what I'm gonna do is to go through with you the different parts of Massive X to show you how it all linked up to that sound itself. Now for the first synth, it's actually an arpeggio. Let me just go to the routing tab. As you can see, it's very simple. You have an oscillator that goes to the filter and also an EQ and delay. Now I'm just gonna turn off all this first so that you guys can hear. So a massive is basically a sine triangle saw square, and the waveform is sort of like a triangle, in between a triangle and a square itself. In the envelope section, the attack is relatively low, but the release is about almost to a mid-level knob. You get more like a plucky sound. Now on LFO4, over here, I have a switcher LFO. The rate is pretty low. I use like a sine wave, and this sine wave is assigned to the frequency knob of the filter itself. I'm on a low pass 4, and I have a bit of resonance here with 0 key tracking, and the frequency is about 974 Hz, and I have the LFO4 going back and forth just a tiny bit to give a bit of like natural harmonics within the sound. Now you can hear that the sound is actually starting to be more mellow, more cut off because of the filter, and it opens up based on the rate of your LFO. Feel free to play around with the rate. The next thing I want to do is I have the EQ. I reduce the low gain a little bit so that it won't be so muddy with the other synths coming in later. I also have a spatial delay, which is up on sync, and I have the mix at around 27.8%. As you can see from the delay itself, I have 1/8 on the right and 1/16 on the left, so it creates a bit of variation in terms of the echo that it produces with this synth. Now the second synth is also a plug sound, but it's actually a higher pitch of a plug sound. The routing is only 2 oscillators going to an EQ and to a reverb. Now EQ is important for most of synth stacking, especially like these kind of tracks that Noah B is doing, because basically you can control the frequencies that match together with in between synths. So having control to your EQ of your synths gives you the chance to make your synth stacks more fuller. Oscillator 1, I have something that is almost like a square as a base, and oscillator 2, I have a sine wave. In oscillator 2, basically I increase the pitch itself at 12, so it gets layered with the lower pitch on oscillator 1. In order to make a plug, the envelope has to be something like this. Basically, my release at 0.75 milliseconds and my attack is at 5.23 milliseconds. So you get this very spiky kind of vibe. As you can hear it, the sound is really very plucky. So that's what he used to balance with the lower arpeggios before that. As you can hear that this synth is basically higher than the previous arpeggio. Now envelope 2 is connected to the wavetable position of oscillator 1 and oscillator 2. So the shape of envelope 2 is pretty fast as well as in comparison to envelope 1. So it looks similar to envelope 1, and I apply envelope 2 to these two synths. So it kind of morphs this plug sound at a very fast rate. I have LFO4 on a sine wave. The rate is very low and it's applied to the frequency of the filter. Basically, the filter is at a higher range so that they get a higher output of the synth itself, going back and forth in a small distance under the low pass 4 in the Asimov filter. So for the EQ, I have both the low and mid gain down, and I push the high gain a little bit, give it a little bit of high end boost. And also I added a reverb, a Wanderlust reverb, very spacey kind of reverb here in Massive X. I give it about 15%, 14.7% on the mix so that you don't get too muddied with the first synth that we did. So if you look at the third synth, it's also very simple to do. We have the oscillator going to the Asimov filter, to the EQ, reverb, and delay. Basically, oscillator 1 is on like a triangle wave. The voicing itself is on two voices on unison. Now basically this sound is still sounding a little flat. I would assume that Noah B added a little bit of pitch shifting over here. LFO4 is basically tied to the pitch of this oscillator itself. It's going down just a little bit by 0.2. LFO4 is on a triangle kind of shape with a relatively mid kind of speed at 5.29 Hz. By doing this, basically it allows the LFO to adjust with the pitch a little bit to make it sound more dreamy. Towards the end of each note, you can hear the pitch is going up and down, which is pretty cool. And as for the envelope itself, it's pretty straightforward. You have a very sharp attack on like a very ramped up curve, and you have a high sustain. And towards the end, you have a very high release so that it has a little bit of tailing towards the end. So it goes to the filter. I'm on the Asimov filter over here with a low pass 2, and the frequency is at 1.28 kilohertz with a high key tracking at 91.9. You can even put it at 100%, that's fine. So for the EQ, I have the low gain pushed down a little bit so it's not so muddy because it's more on the mid octave of the whole stack. And the mid and the high gain I didn't touch at all because I think the triangle wave is already enough to make the sound really full. For the reverb, I use a Wanderlust reverb, and this one I like the tails to be longer. So with the reverb, I put it at 71.2%. Also the stereo delay, I put it at sync with 8 notes on the right and 16 notes on the left. This will give a bit of delays to the reverb as well to create more tailing for this synth, and therefore it's going to be sounding very dreamy. Ooh! So synth number 4 is similar to the previous synth that we did. It's just that this is on a higher octave, I believe. The routing is basically one oscillator to the filter and to a reverb and a delay. Now the wavetable is basically a sine wave. I have a LFO4 which is connected to the pitch. Then again, this gives a little bit of tremolo effect like what we did for the previous synth at 0.2, and this is on a triangle wave with a relatively mid rate. If I go to envelope 1, you guys can see that the synth has a very ramped up attack with a high sustain, and the release is pretty high. Next thing, in order to make it more dark and make it more sounding fuller, I added a filter, and the filter is on a low pass 4 with a high key tracking. It's at 173 Hz. This will kind of push the higher ends down so it complements with the previous synth. And to top it off, basically we have the reverb and the stereo delay. On the reverb, it's still a Wanderlust reverb with a mix at 23.8%, not too much. I also have a stereo delay, which is at the 8th and the 8th on left and right. Both of them are at the same rate with a mix at 66.9%. Noah B used a Reese Bass for this one. sounds beautiful. I'm going to run through very simply in this Mass Effects, but if you guys want to learn more about Reese Basses in detail, I'm going to leave the video up here. I have two oscillators that goes into the filter and out to the effects, and as you can see the effects, I don't really have any effects here because the Reese Bass should sound really tight on its own. If you look at the oscillators, I'm using two saw waves. Now basically for Reese Basses, you're supposed to use saw waves and detune them slightly. So I have the first one negatively detuned and the second one positively detuned. Both are around the same range with a very minimal detune, not too much. And basically the master pitch, I change it to -12. I have LFO4, which is a sine wave with a rate which is at 2.39 Hz. I drag LFO4 to the master pitch, which is 0.2. This again gives you the tremolo or the pitch bending effect for this Reese Bass itself. For the voice settings, it's basically on unison with two voices. And the envelope itself has a very high sustain and short release with a ramped up kind of attack. I turn the glide mode on. The time is at 303 milliseconds. So this creates a glide or like a slide to the next note whenever I play. So the next thing I want to talk about is the filter. A good Reese Bass is basically knowing where's the sweet spot for having the frequency cut off and having that modulated with an LFO as well. So I have an azimuth filter here on a low pass 2 with a little bit of resonance. I have LFO5, which is a sine wave as well, with a rate at 0.42 attached to the frequency of this azimuth filter. So I have the azimuth filter frequency at 342 Hz and it goes back and forth to give you that growling kind of sound. I hope I did justice for Noah B's track. I apologize if it's not as accurate, but I tried to get as close to how Noah B would have made it. And now let's listen to the full stack itself once again. As you can see that the synths that I try to emulate from the song called Nylon of Noah B's track is actually very simple. The concepts of sound designing is actually very simple when you know your wavetables well. Of course, it takes a lot of practice, but I believe that the more you do it, the more that you understand how to create the synths that you want or inspired by your favorite artist, in this case, like me, Noah B. Now I have a couple of videos that I did for synth design, melody stacks, arpeggios, but I really like this one and I think you guys should watch it because it's also related to how I did a melody stack sounding like Noah B and also climax, shoutouts to the legends. I'm gonna leave that video up here. Otherwise, you guys can also follow me on Instagram at vibesynthetic. Over there on Instagram, I do have a few synth design videos in my reels. I'm talking about Reese Basses, melodic arps, pads, and many more. You guys can watch it at your own time and learn through my reels as well. Also, you guys can connect with me through the DMs if you guys have any questions regarding Massive X. I will try my best to answer all the questions if I know the answer. Of course, I have to do a bit of research as well. Yeah, remember, just practice on your sound design. Regardless what wavetable synthesizer you use, there's definitely a way to emulate a sound that you really want. Now do me a favor, if you guys really like this video, remember to smash that like button and subscribe to my channel. Remember to hit that post notification bell button so whenever I release new videos, you guys will get notified. Who knows, I'll be doing a climax video or another Noah B sound design video. Just comment down below what kind of other wave tutorials that you guys want me to cover, and hopefully I'll get to cover that on the next one. My name is Vibesynthetic. It's nice to catch you guys again on this video. Have a lovely day. Peace out, guys.